And we're back at South Texas Now. You're watching Joe Flores. I'm a nurse practitioner and an attorney, and it's always my pleasure to bring on very interesting guests. We're talking about something very serious that affects each and every one of us in one way or the other. You are joining, once again, former federal magistrate Brian Owsley, now a professor at the University of North Texas in Dallas. And we're very fortunate to have him because we're talking about now, this next half of the show, the quote-unquote war on drugs and the effect it has not only here in the Western Hemisphere, but around the world. Welcome back.
It's great to be back. Thank you, Jeff.
Brian, I wanted to ask you, a lot of people don't know how cocaine and, meth super labs, everybody's, a lot of people sing Breaking Bad and things, but the reality, how did it come about the last 2-3 decades where Mexico now is the boss and not Pablo Escobar in Colombia?
Some of it stems in part from, I used to joke about methamphetamine being the one solid narcotic that we could produce on our own, right? We grow some marijuana in certain places in the United States, but we got a lot of that from abroad. And similarly, opium and heroin derivative and cocaine coming, at least historically, from places like Colombia. But methamphetamine, anyone with a decent little ability to understand some basic chemistry could make it at home. Right, there's, it got so simple that you could take a 2-liter empty bottle and make a version of meth in that. Nasty drug, nasty pollutants, and a certain amount of danger, as you can, anyone who's seen Breaking Bad will appreciate. But nonetheless, you can make it. And then, in response to that, this is why you can't go into the CVS and necessarily buy things with epinephrine
or
Sudafed, because those were they were part and parcel of making methamphetamine, and so legislatures around the country basically decided, well, if this is what people are using this for when they make large purchases, we're not going to let them buy 20 units of Sudafed. We're only going to let them buy one, and we're going to put it behind the locked counter so that people can't steal it as readily as they were. And so those medications are readily available across the border, and you could, ramp up large-scale production along the lines of maybe if you've seen Breaking Bad and sort of that type of facility. You can create that facility right across the border and have the access to the chemicals that you need to make it as easily in a way that it wasn't as easily after a while to cook meth in the United States.
And that's what I'm hearing is the super labs are making as much as they work in shifts. Each super lab can make like 50 kilograms or more than 100 pounds every 8 hours.
Yes.
And they're just shipping it, and it's going through all the big corridors, I-10, I-75, and it's just being distributed. 35, big. So when the Mexicans became the kingpins, and but here domestically, are we usurping some of theirs? You're saying that we're home cooking. Are we having our own super labs, or are we still relying on Mexico?
We're still relying on Mexico. I'm sure that there are people sort of a la Breaking Bad who are cooking on a pretty large scale in the United States. It used to be that you would find sort of deserted trailers or whatnot in the middle of sort of forests, in the middle of, the desert or wherever that have been abandoned or used up. I think while that no doubt goes on some level, we're sort of past that, and we're getting, much of our narcotics as it relates to methamphetamine from south of the border. The problem is, notwithstanding the capabilities of Border Patrol, they're probably catching maybe 20% of what's coming in, whether it's meth, cocaine, heroin, marijuana. They just don't catch a significant percentage of what the American populace is using or consuming.
It's scary because there's an 80%, it's like Walmart, they expect 10% to steal. It's breakage, that people are, and then I'm hearing of these guys that I remember when I was in front of you and had the honor to be in front of you on the bench. They were human trafficking. Now they're giving them, by gunpoint, learning how to swallow grapes, and then they're swallowing, a kilo of heroin, and then they get a discount when they travel over here. So they're not only human trafficking, but bringing the drugs. So globally, though, we've created a demand here. We're probably 40% of the demand in the world, maybe a little more. I don't know all the statistics, but since you have that federal criminal defense expertise, globally, like the DEA, what are they dealing with as far as money, delivery? What are the effects of the war on drugs, and then globally how it's being affected?
Well, I'm not sure that anyone wants to win the war on drugs.
Really?
So, we have multiple agencies that are involved in the war on drugs. You mentioned the DEA, Border Patrol, ICE, Homeland Security, and ICE and Homeland Security and DEA all part of, ICE, Border Patrol, and DEA are all now part of Homeland Security, but they are also sort of separate agencies, and they're all sort of fighting this war on drugs. The federal government, Department of Justice, all these state entities as well. So I think there are plenty of people who want to do it, but on the flip side, there's so much money involved. So there's a lot of people in the U.S. who are making money just off of selling or trafficking in narcotics. There's the whole consumer base who doesn't want it to go away because they want access to whatever their drug of choice is. And then when you think about the war on drugs, we have, we as a nation are one of the most heavily incarcerated as it relates to Western democracies, right? And so not only do we, for example, in Texas have over 100 state prisons, but we, in Texas and across the country, have multiple corporations who create facilities to house people in. And so, CCA.
They're on the stock market, NASDAQ or something, that you can buy shares.
Yeah. So, it's sort of the criminal industrial complex.
Nobody wants to win the war on drugs, is the opinion of many, because even there's a Walmart and a jail in a small town.
Yeah.
That's the way it kind of rolls. And if you're not working at the Walmart, you're a prison guard.
Right.
And a lot of these facilities, I think, our sentencing guidelines, I was checking out that we give 2 to 3 times the sentences that they give in Europe, like in England and, Canada. But the privatization, what does that do to rehabilitation?
Well, and that's, you talk about the disproportionate sentences in the U.S. for narcotics offenses versus Canada and our peers in Europe, and they are going the treatment route, right? And it is much better to help someone solve their problem with narcotic usage, in my opinion, than to put them in jail, basically maybe teach them how to engage in other criminal conduct, and then let them out and without having sort of dealt with the underlying sort of cause of their addiction, whether it's some kind of emotional or physical trauma from earlier in their life. But if you don't sort of give them the tools to sort of handle their need to self-medicate through narcotics, then they're just going to go back to what they know best, which is self-medicating with narcotics.
I was also looking at the housing bubble in 2008. They said if you put all the money that cocaine made, it probably would have solved about a third of the problem of the world global depression, because there's so much bucks. So globally, I mean, time's just flown by. We got a couple of minutes, but globally, how do you see the traffickers? I mean, they're ingenious a lot of the time, So how does that affect, globally now? Let's go for beyond America and Mexico.
Well, one, I want to follow up real quick on the ingenious point. I have a case that I teach in federal criminal procedure, and the name of the case is eluding me at the point, but the upshot is, what these traffickers were doing was they were taking cocaine, they were basically liquefying it, and they were putting it in clothes, right? So you'd import all these shirts that are basically infused with cocaine extract. And then on the state side in the U.S., you would take away that, you would extract it and you'd have your cocaine again, and you'd have smuggled it in successfully. But the upshot, I think, to your original question is this is a demand problem, and this is a problem that the United States is creating in many regards, because we want, as a nation, these narcotics, whatever it is, right? We see that with cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and other countries are happy to supply it, right? I mean, historically, cocaine from Colombia, Afghanistan was a big producer of opium and opium poppies that would be turned into heroin. We have Mexico's ability to manufacture on large scales methamphetamine. So we are basically incentivizing other places to develop this as an export to the U.S. It's an illegal export, but it's not being taxed. And so, maybe we're getting to a point with marijuana, at least, where we're sort of reassessing, and I think we're going to see probably in 10 or 15 years legal marijuana pretty much everywhere.
Can I bring you back on marijuana? I mean the subject, not on it. We're done, and the time has flown by, but we appreciate you.
Thank you. Always happy to talk about marijuana.
Yes, and you've been listening once again to former federal magistrate Brian Owsley, and also law professor, and we are out of time. Thank you all, and God bless.
Thanks for having me.